Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR, and I'm your host, the counselor. Today, I'm going to talk about that insurrection that happened yesterday in the United States, in Washington, D.C. There was an uprising somewhat, and Donald Trump was quite upset because he didn't win the election, and he vowed to get back at the people. Now, unfortunately, and I got to say, unfortunately, and I do mean this, someone got killed. As a matter of fact, four people got killed, which I think was definitely avoidable. And I think that is a major tragedy in itself. However, I think democracy took a hit, a big hit yesterday. I mean, with a lot of the bias that was going on in society when you think about it. When you realizing people and revving them up. And it wasn't just yesterday he was revving them up. He was been talking about the issues of being cheated out of his election and how he wanted to stop the steal. So he basically had hundreds of thousands of people feeling that, you know what I mean? They were being cheated out of something. And so he decided to go on this rant and rave about how they were going to fix things and how they wanted to have their own count. They wanted to have a recount. Although there was some politicians already during that time that he was carrying on in front of all these people, they were actually having a vote on if they were going to approve Joe Biden or not. Well, the funny thing is the Republicans had their way of addressing it. They knew that inside the politicians were going to oppose many of the votes that would affirm Joe Biden as the next president. However, that didn't matter to Donald Trump. He had his own agenda. This man was on a mission. See, he had this mind state, or shall I say state of mind, whereas he was determined to create havoc and chaos. He wanted to go out with a bang. He was hoping that maybe his junior advisor, or what was it, Mike Pence, would actually try to oppose the votes, which would have affirmed Joe Biden in as the next president. However, Mike Pence did not follow through with that because he knows the rule of law. Despite this, Donald Trump was saying that he wanted justice. He wanted the people to see that he's really been cheated out of something. And what I'm going to say is that it was chaotic yesterday. I mean, protesters were just, they were going at the building. They were going and actually getting into physical confrontations with the police. They just were walking into the building where the seminars were being held. The Senate floor was just a mess. Secret Service police and the DC police had to draw their guns, barricade the politicians inside, while outside protesters were climbing all over the place, smashing windows, breaking in, walking around with Union Jack flags waved. I mean, I thought that's what the Civil War was back in the 1800s. I thought that was in place so that we could prevent all this. However, there's been some disturbing news coming out of yesterday, but I find most disturbing is that if it were a different culture that were doing that, there would have been a catastrophe. Like, to me, I already think it was quite catastrophic as far as, when people have to die over this. I mean, that's a threat on democracy, and it's so sad because if you have no rule of law, what do you have? You have chaos. So there were a number of things going on, and I really felt that the international community was looking at the United States with some shame and embarrassment and see the role that the United States has as a leadership or a leader nation, a nation that's supposed to represent true democracy, is kind of falling. And I think what is happening is that there's a lot of this behavior that's being allowed. There's enablers out there, and the enablers are stirring up the people. And I don't understand how it got out of hand so bad. And I kind of realized that Donald Trump was inciting riot behavior. But what happened is people took it to a next level. Like, even though there were police inside the Senate floor with guns drawn, so after the protesters smashed the windows and they knew that there were guns drawn inside this facility, there were people trying to crawl through the windows, and bam, someone got shot. And right then, when I saw that, I went, wait, this is actually happening on television. This is the face of America right now. It's in a really sorry state. And if you think that it was kind of like almost like a lucid dream in the sense that there were police officers taking pictures with some of the protesters. There were protesters climbing all over the walls. There were protesters making threats on the news, talking about they're going to come back with guns because they were pepper sprayed. There were protesters putting their hands in the middle of cameras, trying to block the view of the cameras. Like, there was just so much going on, and I'm sure the people inside were wondering, what the hell's going on? Like, it's crazy. It was chaotic. It was a mess. And Donald Trump was nowhere to be found once he walked them, or they walked over to the government buildings where the Senate was holding meetings. It just got crazy. And I think people are really taking a look now at the United States and saying there's some things that really need to be addressed. And one of the major things that really need to be addressed is the the attitude of the Americans. See, I think what is happening is the Republicans are trying to get power no matter what. They'll draw in anyone with any ideology. I mean, yesterday they found pipe bombs. I don't know. They say they might have found a gun or something. But, when you look at it, you're like, people were just feeling like they just wanted to lash out. And they were actually talking about being ripped off and the vote being stolen. And never in history has this happened where we've gotten to this point where mobs have actually not accepted the rule of law as far as votes. I mean, Donald Trump was telling people well before the even election started. He was saying to people, before the votes were being counted, he was letting people know, I'm not going to go quietly. And they weren't prepared. And I could see yesterday that they had 1/10 of the protection that they normally would have. I mean, if that were a Black Lives Matter, they would have had Washington, D.C. full of military police. You would have never got 100 feet with inside the Senate floor. But these individuals were going inside the building, sitting in Senate seats, trashing the place, breaking windows, running past guards, just totally ignoring the rule of law. And I think when you show the world, not just Americans, when you show the world that there's some real change that needs to happen, and you show the world that you're basically out of control, then we need to have some more unity. We need to say to these parties, there's too much going on. And I think what happened was with Donald Trump, I think he started doing things that a lot of presidents didn't really engage in. And I think media was one of his outlets, and he used it to his advantage, but it did really get out of control where he was inciting people from every uh, corner of the country to come forth and, listen to his rhetoric. And I really think and believe that there were a lot of disenfranchised people there. And it's really made me wonder too, because I think the majority of people were 40s and above. Yes, there were young people, But if you could see the faces of many of these individuals, they had to be 45 and above, at least 70%. So you're saying, what's going on there? Why are these people who are in their 40s and 50s and 60s, why are they having this attitude where they don't have to respect the rule of law? And I think they start to identify with Donald Trump. And I don't know how they do that, but he is catering to the disenfranchised. However, it just went totally left in the sense that people started to lose it. They didn't even want to listen, they didn't want to back down. Yes, a curfew had to be put in place, but what made these people think that they could just carry on this way and neglect the amendments that have been put in place for generations? You know, they were violating the rule of law and they didn't care. It's almost like they felt like it was their right to just, oppose authority. Now, if anybody else in society would have done it, what would have happened? See, above all else, I think last night showed that there was a double standard. And we should be concerned about that because it basically saying there is no equity. And we can do what we want to do, and you're different. And I mean, even the police weren't really pushing back that much. Some were behind gates, but some were not really opposing some of these protesters. They were letting them stay in stairs. Like there were areas that they were totally not supposed to be in, that they were actually gathering, and it's just like huge numbers were on scaffolding, climbing on walls. It was ridiculous. It was just chaotic. And then you got to ask yourself, why wasn't this planned for? And there's got to be one major reason why this wasn't planned for. And I think the major reason this was not planned for is because I think the head guy, Donald Trump, had his say, and he had talked about this for weeks, about going in and disrupting and making sure that the people understand that he was robbed. And he went to court several times, and despite the judge rulings in many states, he still carried forth his mindset that he's been robbed. And now, today, a new day, it's all over the news, of course, and people are talking about how some of the Republicans have just decided to walk out. They quit the party. They didn't want to engage in it. I think there was 5 or 6 that did want. And there's still some in there that stayed. To me, I don't understand how we didn't see this coming. And it's worrisome that we didn't see this coming. And what really bothered me is if we look back at some of the behaviors that he engaged in, and I mean, when he sent a missile earlier, it was either earlier this year, I think it was February 2020, well, last year, February 2020, where he sent a missile over there and internationally, I'm not going to name names, and the response was that these people responded by blowing up a commercial plane, which killed hundreds of people. And many people didn't know that there was an issue. But he had sent some missiles and they retaliated, and it affected families. And I just saw that some of the families were offered like 15,000, some up to 150,000 per person. And I thought, wow, does life matter anymore? Are we just reacting? And I thought yesterday with these middle-aged people who were going through these changes, there's something going on. There's something going on where they feel that they have been ripped off and that they have privilege and they can do what they want to do. And they are feeling that things have not gotten to the point where they've been happy. So they start to follow Donald Trump. Like, remember, Donald Trump really has no political background. And this is what blows my mind. He has no political experience. He went simply on popularity. And I think the first mistake was putting people in power like someone at the helm of nuclear weapons who was a former movie star. Now, he's not the first. Ronald Reagan was a Hollywood star. And see, right there, it's like, what? We didn't have enough qualified individuals to fill the job? But this is an example. Just by having this man in here, this is a good example. And we need to look at this from many different sides. We don't want to look at it just from yesterday. We want to go back and say, how did this happen? How did these individuals get to the point where they're at? Who made the decision to pull in people into politics who have no political experience because they ran a television show? Ronald Reagan was a cowboy, so everybody loved him. So they put him in. But I still think there's something to be said about procedure, experience, understanding of the people. I think you have to have some experience with the people. I think you have to be an advocate on some level, some experience, knowledgeable in the ways of politics and how people respond. Sure, you can bend the will of the people if you put the right things in their eyes, if you put the right thoughts in their head, right? If they see certain things that they like, they're going to follow. And I think that's what he's done. And he's done business. And was there good things that he's done? Well, that's debatable. He might have done some good things, especially when it came to trade. However, that's irrelevant when it comes to democracy. I mean, does it matter how well trading goes or if you create a few jobs? If you're stamping on democracy, we need democracy around the world. So I question what's going on in politics. Why are we allowing individuals to jump into these very powerful, some of the most powerful positions, if not the most powerful position in the world? Someone who could, by the press of a button, destroy countries, if not continents. And that's not concerning anyone. And what should concern people is what happened yesterday wasn't just a single incident. This is a culmination of enablers for their personal gain, popularity, and the people have been put on the back burner. And I'm worried today more than ever because it seems like the politicians who are getting in, even in 2021, right, would be the rich, the people who have the money, who can afford to campaign anymore. Is it really the will of the people? And we have to ask ourselves, is the playground equitable? Are people who actually care for people in those positions? And this is a clear indication that no, they could talk about America being great again. However, that's just a slogan. It's been nerve-wracking when you think about it. Now, forget about the parties. Forget about Democrat and Republican. Let's just talk about the people. And the people have no power. The people have lost their way. The people who are disenfranchised or the people who feel that someone's getting their say and they're being left out, they're standing up and joining these little parties, and they're using the media to form these groups, and they're getting in with these politicians. And I'm saying, wait a second, what are we not seeing? We live in a diverse world. Why are we having flags flown in a democracy that only promote one perspective, one point of view, one people, when there's many people in the country? These countries were built on immigration. That's how they started, immigrating over here. Now, my point is where do we go from here? I mean, we have Donald Trump. And there are a lot of people who are saying, oh, Donald Trump. But it's not just Donald Trump. That's worrisome in itself that Donald Trump gets in because he's popular. He's been around politicians. Yes, he's part of the money game. And in business, he's earned his stripes. However, business has taken over morality. And business is something that people are aspiring to. However, what we are not doing is we're not making sure that the democracy is being protected. And the reason why is because we have too many enablers. And the playground is not fair. And the reason why it's not fair is because the small minority are controlling the majority. And as much as you change parties here, we have to still say that people are buying votes. The more money you have, the more you can market and advertise, the more you're on television. It's just like a formula, and that's not complicated at all. And so I said we're getting away from people, democracy, protection of the people. When your government is changing dramatically, and it has changed since the 1970s. I mean, we could say Democrat, Republican, but if you see the history going back, the Republicans were the ones that advocated for freedom of the slaves, and then the Democrats back then were against it. They wanted to keep slavery in place. And then, in the 70s, that kind of changed. So really what I'm saying here is that this is a breakdown in society. And it's actually a time for us to look at what is going on and how are we going to protect democracy and how are we going to create equity amongst people. Because if the money is telling the tale, we're in a lot of trouble. The rest of the world is looking around and shaking their heads at the United States, and they should be, because that is not a democracy. That's a hypocrisy. And when you see even 4 people getting killed because of their belief that they've been cheated, my thing is that if it were some other culture, like a black culture, it would have been devastating. However, they thought there's no need for us to protect our own. We're not going to do anything. And that was exactly opposite from the truth. Those people didn't care about what color they wanted in. They were ripped off. They wanted to stop the deal. They wanted to disrupt democracy. And it has never gotten to the point where people got in so easily and made a mockery of the system. Yes, there's been incidents prior, decades ago. However, we kept it in check. And yes, there's always room for improvement. But people have to start looking now and saying, politicians, we need to rewrite some of the policies and procedures that are out there to protect people. We talk about the Fourth Amendment rights, but it seems like people aren't paying attention. Who's really making the decisions? Is it government anymore, or is it big business? And I'd have to say it's big business. The government is just a regulator, and even then they're not even regulating. And when they do regulate, they're regulating for themselves. Those people marched up to the government buildings and they had backpacks on. They could have done anything. They found explosive devices. There were people making threats, but they could have done anything. But they turned around and decided, we're not going to listen to the rule of law. We don't care what the results of this meeting will be. We're going to stop it. We're going to take control. And basically, it showed the world that the United States is out of control. So we have to reset. We have to reset the button. We have to not just go after the Donald Trumps or the disenfranchised. We have to reset the button and look at how democracy is structured. And my concern is that it is in favor of the few, and it's always been like that. But I think so much so that people who are making the decisions are the ones who have all the money. I mean, do we even trust the election process anymore? I mean, we talk about external countries attacking the United States electoral process, countries that are trying to get in and make a mockery of the democracy. And really nothing's being done about it. I mean, where was the FBI yesterday, or the CIA, or Homeland Security? Why weren't they on alert? Why didn't they protect democracy? Forget which party. Why weren't they? Why aren't they a separate entity? Don't they have a voice of their own? Well, I argue they don't have a voice of their own. I think it all falls on the shoulders of the president. I think the president has too much power. And we have to look at that. Too much power. One person with so much power is ridiculous. It's atrocious. Too much power. There should not be one individual with so much power to control all these agencies where they sit back and do nothing for fear of either being fired, right? Being put in jail. And it's so wild, all the things that have happened. I mean, there's been politicians who are afraid of Donald Trump. And it's because he put people in jail. And as you see, as the end of his term has come, he's pulled people out. So he has so much power that you shake your head and you said, wait a minute, that person here went against society, broke the laws, was put in prison, and this president just pulled them out not even months after. And it's all the people that were justifiably imprisoned through a process. A detailed, in-depth process. However, the president has the power to pull them out. Or he has the power to put them in. He has the power to bully if he chooses to. So I think we saw a number of things over the past 4 years, but people can't really be surprised. I mean, if you really look at things right from the beginning, there were problems. You know, when we were sitting back and watching people getting beat up at these rallies and people walking around with these Union Jack flags and just, you know, having the field day with their power and how they're going to impart it on people. This was quite upsetting. However, people can't say they didn't know this was going to go on. Of course this was going to happen. We were told. We weren't just given warning signs. We were told, you know, I'm not going to surrender. I've been duped. Now, even though it went through the process, that wasn't good enough. But we had no one or no Congress that was willing to act. Even people in the political party who now have the nerve to jump ship, the Republicans, the handful, oh, we don't want to be part of it. Don't you think you're a little bit too late? Don't you think you're a little bit too late? Oh, you rode the wave, so now you jump ship. Listen, this is going to go down in history, and whether you jump ship days after, weeks after, months after, the point is, when you were on board, and your name is being counted. And I really have to say that the ones who sat back, whether you jump in later, or you sat in that seat and you're still holding your head up saying, oh no, we're right, we've been robbed. I have to say, people died. And right there, the party should be dismantled. When people are dying like the way they did, when democracy was attacked the way it was, people died from that. And that was a president that had these people so worked up that it became personal. it became a personal vendetta. And even in those moments, those last moments, the president turned on some of his own colleagues in the party, saying that they were weak, because they did not overrule the rule of law. So things really started to turn, and that's when it got real disturbing, because he had a message, and the message in many hands turned deadly. And maybe they assumed that, oh, it's the president, nothing will be wrong. I think they assumed it's us. Don't worry about it, we'll be okay. We're all right. And I'd say, why don't you ask the families of those people who died yesterday how they feel today? And what I say is, I feel for the families, and I really believe that whatever political ideology you had, you don't deserve that, because you're just listening to the government tell you what to think. And if the government tells you to take COVID-19 and shoot it in your arm, if you to take bleach and shoot it in your arm, people listen to that. There was no accountability at all. And it's sad, because there were so many people that were misled. I mean, calling reporters out when you're having your meetings in front of the public, you're disgracing and talking down to report. When has that happened in history? If you're going to talk to reporters or agencies, you do that in private. You don't create a little verbal confrontation in public and attack the individuals who are reporting news. Now, certain news agencies are going to report certain things in their own way, but attacking when you're the president, I think there are a lot of things to think about now. And I think that the world is getting a lesson on democracy. And I think the world needs to stand up if you want your freedoms. Because if you have one person who feels that they were wronged, and they feel that they are above the law, and the truth is he was above the law, and that's what should be looked at more than anything. He was above the law, and he was allowed to take those individuals and move their thoughts in his direction, and they took action regardless of the consequences, and people died. And I think there needs to be accountability. However, I'm not hearing that ring out there today. I'm not hearing he needs to be accountable. People died. I'm hearing, oh, we might impeach. Well, he's got 13 days left. What are you impeaching? And, oh, we might have to worry about what those protesters might do over the course of these next 13 days. What are they going to do? Joe Biden has to still get sworn in, right? He still has to have his ceremony on January 20th, 2021. However, there are a lot of individuals in media, people talking in the community about, is this over? Is it put to rest? And they're worried that it's not. See, we have to think about something too. Okay? We have to think, if you do pass a law to pull Donald Trump out, what will be the ramifications in society? What will people think? Will we be making him a martyr? I mean, I really believe that, number one, we should let Joe Biden take office. He should do what is expected of the president. And we should allow Donald Trump to finish out his term, his 13 days. However, we need to monitor the situation. I don't think we need to make a martyr out of him in the sense that, oh, this is going to be, it's already going to be his legacy. But I think we don't want to really bring people to the point where we're going to react because they reacted. I think what we need to do is we need to protect democracy, and we need to understand and let those people understand one thing. Sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. It's just the way it is. And if you lose, you move on. There's been party after party that have lost past elections, and they've always respected the rule of law and democracy. However, we've got a change here that we cannot tolerate. So if you do pull them out, then you pull them out. However, you might encourage other people to think, oh, well, instead of following the process, you're going to do him dirty. And you're not doing him dirty. However, the ramifications are too great. And I don't think he deserves that to be made a martyr of. I don't think people need to look at him like, oh, he was a rebel that went down and it was injustice. And it wasn't injustice. I think he just lost. Like when he got in to politics, yeah, they were sore. They didn't like it, but they still didn't upset the rule of law. And he did his term, as he should. But we have to learn from what has happened. And I'm not just picking on a Donald Trump. I'm picking on democracy, his being sacrificed, because we are no longer in control. The few who are controlling these large corporations, the rich, who can fund these elections properly through their donations. These are the ones who are sitting in those seats. These are the ones who are making those decisions for the masses. And it's not reflective of the masses, unfortunately. And I'm concerned that we're in a country here where we just are so complacent that there's a lot of negativity going down. It's so silent over here. In the United States, it's loud. It's worrisome, but at least you get to look at it, and what you see, you can make some changes, and people could see that there's a generation that needs to be adhered to the rules. They need to follow them, and they need to respect what's been put in place. People have died for these rules. People have sacrificed their lives for these rules, for the Fourth Amendment, and their human rights. They've died for that. And now it seems like, well, we don't accept that. We're going to do what we want to. And it's going to continue to be chaos until we learn to respect democracy and respect the rule of law and change them accordingly and actually make elections count. And the concern is that elections are beginning to be perceived as less valid as the years go on. The attacks, the accusations, politicians who are, right from the beginning, before the elections start, they're already claiming that they're corrupt and they're doing things like stopping the mail or, taking mailboxes off the corner. Like, it's just a lot of manipulation. And yes, the news is out there and they will always be out there. However, what the politicians are doing is very clear. On both sides, it's very clear, is that, number one, they are still looking to a system that has not changed in years. So they're just riding, they're going along for the ride. And unfortunately, even the United States is starting to forget that there are other countries out there to consider. And rather than working with them or respecting them, we are allowing a lot of verbal abuse and discrimination come through our communication by calling it Chinese virus. And it's ridiculous. These terms are offensive. However, they're unprofessional, they're unbecoming of a president, and it's showing that we do not have a sense of respect and responsibility. The leadership has faded, and we're calling out people and being disrespectful. No matter the truth that we claim behind it, I don't think there's a need to be so aggressive, in the sense that I think we still need to work with people. I think we need to still respect the rule of law and have dignity and respect for our partners in all spaces. And I think we're losing that, if not lost it. And I think this was just another example where the United States really needs to make some changes. All countries need to make changes, but it's being on the front stage with this type of behavior that is a true indicator that something is not right with democracy. And it hasn't been right for years. And it has been the same old game plan, and it needs to change. And we need to start looking at people's rights and looking at the electoral process and how those people who get in and get voted, who have big pockets, are making decisions. And it's showing you now more than ever, just because you have money does not mean you are a good leader, that you should be in that position. With no history of political experience, no knowledge in regards to the laws, it's just one-sided. There should be certain criteria that you meet. And I think when it comes to leadership, we are learning now that there's a lot more to leadership than money. But we have to ask ourselves, is it too late? Because the people who have the money are the ones who are even dictating to our governments what's good for the economy, right? Like if they mess up and they screw up the books, they go for money from the government and we bail them out, right? And they get to decide who gets loans and who doesn't. It's a big mess. And I think in 2021, we have to look at yesterday, January 6th, as a wake-up call. And it's not just for the Donald Trumps. And it's not just for the people who bypass the law. But most importantly, it's for democracy. If we want democracy around the world, how are we going to have that if we can't even have it in our own home countries? Democracy is being threatened. It's already being threatened in international countries around the world. But one of the mainstays of democracy is being toppled by its own people. It's not an outside influence. And that is what's scary in 2021, is that the issues that are going on in the United States is turmoil from within. I mean, it's so weird because I don't think a lot of people thought, with everything going on yesterday, January 6, 2021, no one was talking about COVID-19. No one was talking about the thousands of people who were dying, thousands who were getting infected daily. No one was talking about that at all. They were talking about an election that was done months ago. And they're fighting over that, making a fuss. People were dying over that, but there are people dying by the thousands. But that didn't seem to be the focus. So we have to ask ourselves, where is it our egos that are getting into politics? We have to be able to stamp out some of the ego and get back to the people. There are so many issues that need to be addressed. They're not being addressed. And why is that? Because of poor leadership and political parties that want to be in power. We have a worldwide pandemic, and we're fighting amongst ourselves. We're not addressing the real issues, and we can't even get laws passed because of the political infighting between parties. And I found that it was kind of odd that for months the Americans were trying to put together an aid package that took months, and people were dying by the thousands. So their basic needs weren't even being met because two parties couldn't come to an agreement. And even when the agreement between the Republicans and the Democrats were put in place and it was ready to be signed, who stepped in and opposed it or tried to stop it or stated that they didn't want to sign it because it wasn't enough? However, you're the president. You weren't aware of what was being done in regards to the negotiating of this aid bill. See, this is what we're talking about. Is it the ego or is it the people? And that's what we need to be concerned about. When that takes center stage, we all lose. And see, the people are losing. And they're losing big time. And that leadership that we thought we had is slipping away, and democracy is being threatened. And it's been like that for some time, but it had just came to a head yesterday. So we need to do the reset, get a politician in who's for the people, who can actually calm things down and start focusing on the things that people require. Right now is a time for us to take care of the people. Why have half of these vaccines that they've been talking about for months been sitting on shelves going bad? Why aren't there people out there being treated right now the way they're supposed to? I mean, not even 1/10 of the people have been um, vaccinated. What plan is in place? And why don't we have a plan for the next year on who's going to be vaccinated within what time frame and how it's going to? The people should be focusing on that, how they're going to help take care of the people. We should be focusing on how to support people in other countries who have limited resources. We have so much that we could be doing out there, and we don't have the leadership that are thinking about it. They're doing too much inner fighting. They even do that over here in Canada. The politicians are fighting amongst each other because they got nothing. They're not thinking about anybody else but themselves. And that's the truth. So we're hoping that things change, but that's not good enough. They have to change. They have to start looking at how much power you're putting in the hands of one individual and how much influence, whether it be positive or negative, you want them to have. And we have to ensure that there's an equitable process when it comes to elections. It's not just the money that's going to get the vote because of the marketing and the advertising and the people that are in their pockets. And why do they not have universal daycare in the United States? These are questions that need to be answered. And why are we turning back when politicians fight hard for the people to put in health care, start a process, and then we have a politician, because they want to enact their own form of health care, they just dismantle what's been put together. So instead of building, we are moving forward and backwards and forward, and we're making no progress. And this is problematic. And if you are watching what's going on there, then you have to say, why should we in North America be looking at the United States and be very concerned? And the reason is because it's about democracy. It's not just about the United States. It's about the world, who's watching a major nation, one of the biggest in the world, fall apart. The leadership is dwindling, and we need to make some changes. And the people need to stand up, not just to throw their weight around. They need to stand up, to unite together, to work together. And what does that mean? That means that they have to count. They have to count at the polls. They can't just be counted out because they don't have enough money. They need to have certain criteria, and I think that's what's been lost. We need to keep with democracy, and thank goodness that we did go with putting Joe Biden in his seat that he deserves, that he was elected for. Thank goodness that at least that was accomplished. That's one positive thing that came out of January 6th, which really was January 7th, because I think it happened in 3:30 in the morning. But the point being is that it was a struggle. And it should not be a struggle. There's a process. And there's people who have put their life blood on the line to ensure that this process is supposed to be for all people. However, we have people running through halls showing us that history is being thrown in our faces and democracy is not being perceived as important. But rather than the masses, the individual is taking center stage. And it's unacceptable. So, we could talk all day about this, but I do believe that we have much greater issues to deal with than fighting each other and pointing the finger. I think, if anything, yesterday, January 6, 2021, is a lesson to learn. It's a lesson, and what we should be doing is reflecting back on all the things that have occurred within politics over the last 4 years and see what changes just from those incidents that have happened. What we have been doing wrong. Not what he has been doing wrong. What we have been doing wrong. It's not good enough to jump ship after the ship is sinking. If you're on it, ride it and make things better. But jumping off the ship, abandoning your party instead of staying and making things better is useless. You can't ride the ride and then just before it stops, you jump ship because you don't want to be associated with that. Well, it's too late. And that's what we need to understand, is that accountability. We have to get back to accountability and responsibility. We should not be allowing politicians to jump ship. That's a part of the process. That's another problem in the political process. Why are we having political parties jump ship when something terrible that they are involved in goes awry? No responsibility and no accountability. And I think what we need to do is look at that and say, that is a problem. You stand firm. You put your back up and you acknowledge. See, too many people don't want to acknowledge that they made a mistake. They were wrong. It wasn't right until it's at their doorstep, until someone's banging down their door or breaking in the window and trying to enter into your personal space. Do you decide that, oh, it was wrong, I didn't see this coming? Then you want to change your mind. Well, there's changes that need to happen, and we need to look at the situation as a people and say that there's a lot more wrong than one political party. The process needs to be revamped, reviewed, and enhanced, and reflective of the communities of the day. We have to stop isolating each other and allowing and enabling individuals to take control of democracy. The people have to speak, and it has to be respected. And when they don't, there does need to be some consequences for their actions. Because it's more than just the United States, it's the world that's watching. And if you can't count on a democracy or a democratic nation, what can you count on? Freedoms are afforded to so many people, but sometimes those freedoms can be abused. And when they are abused, we have to look at why this is being allowed, and we have to learn from it. We have to learn what we should be thinking about when this process is neglected and not respected. If we're talking about true democracy. All right, people, I want you to be like the wise old bird and spread the word. It's just thinking. Just thinking about what went wrong. Pointing fingers is not going to be the answer. But taking a look at what's actually happening and why it's happening, the antecedents, the behaviors, the causes, and reworking our democracy to fit with what's really going on and not being afraid to do that and making sure that the eyes are always for the people. All people. Take care of yourself.